Hi, I'm Melissa Goncalves from FemmeRadio, and you're listening to Toys and Tech of the Trade.
What's going on, folks? Thanks for hitting that download button and checking out a brand new episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. I'm your host, Rich, and if this is your first time checking out an episode, first of all, welcome. Second, a bit about what we do here. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with content creators, entrepreneurs, and just awesome folks that are on our radar and discuss the gadgets, the gear, and the tech that they use to run their business, create their content, and overall, be more productive. Now, when it comes to toys, we don't relegate it to the usual talk of action figures, Funko Pops, things of that nature. You'd be surprised what people consider toys, whether it's collecting appliances or collecting ATVs or cars. Everyone's definition of toys is a bit different, and we really embrace that here with much enthusiasm. And it helps us break up a lot of the business talk that we have on this podcast. So, with that intro out of the way, a little bit of housekeeping, and we'll turn things over to this week's guest. So, as many of you know, our last episode was back in December, and it was our holiday gift guide. I really wanted to put out one more episode to close out 2020, but 2020 has been sometimes I feel like we're still in 2020 to some extent, and the holiday season was just difficult for a bunch of reasons, most of them too much to dig into for this episode, and I really don't want to take away from this week's guest. But nonetheless, we are in 2021. We're ready to kick ass in the new year. We're going to be wrapping up this season. We do 22 episodes a season. Episode 44 will be our season 2 finale, and then we're going to get into season 3 of the podcast. And we have so many spectacular guests on deck from many different fields, many different industries, just coming in, sharing their stories, hopefully giving you folks tools, inspiration, and just the fire to go out there and pull the trigger on that business idea or that plan or that project that's kind of just been rattling around in your brain. I really hope that that's something that our guests and even myself to a point can bring out of you, the listener. And with everything going on now, the uncertainties, whether it's mental uncertainty, fiscal uncertainty, we all need something to hold on to. And if you have that passion project, that dream, whatever it is, just like I said, rattling around in your head, I hope that these stories and these tactics and tools can help you get that project off the ground, whether it's that website, that clothing brand, that podcast. I hope that these stories can help you take it to the next level and just unleash your strongest self, whether it's personally or professionally. Besides that, I did want to acknowledge the fine folks that Call Me When It's Over, Josie's boy, Alexis A. McCoy, who wrapped up Call Me When It's Over earlier this month. Definitely bummed to see them wrap up the show, but they are really doubling down on their endeavors. Josie's boy with the Painted in Blue brand, which, Josie's boy is incredibly talented, and he's really going to make his mark on this world. And I don't even say that just because we work together, but just because the drive and the passion that he exhibits is just off the charts. And Alexis came on board, joined him as a second mic, and I really came to admire and respect her hustle. Her company, Love Is Enough Productions, is just out there, just tirelessly putting events together, doing things to just better folks around them. And I think that that's just a very, very noble endeavor. In Alexis's case, she's actually done a bunch of virtual events to keep her brand out there and in front of everyone's eyes, which is great. So definitely make sure to check out Painted in Blue, Love Is Enough Productions. We're going to include links for that in the show notes for this episode. As for this week's guest, she introduced herself in the ID for this week's episode, but we're going to turn it over to her and let her share her story as well as the toys and tech of her trade. Let's go. My guest for this week's episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade is owner, founder, entrepreneur, and podcaster Melissa Goncalves, she does the FemmeRadio podcast. She also does the FemmeTrepreneur brand, fashion line. She is super versatile, and she not only does all of this, but she juggles it with her personal life, sharing a lot of her stories and putting women first and making sure that their stories are heard, because it's not just the usual work, careers, and things of that nature, but also family, health, and many of the other things that women have to deal with on a regular basis that sometimes just people gloss over because they want to share the pretty side of being a lady. So Melissa's going to take us through her journey and the toys and tech of her trade. What's going on, Melissa? How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. That was a great intro. I'm over here doing a silent cheer, like, yes, I did that. I'm doing that.
It's interesting because over the last few years, making sure that women have a voice, which is insane, has become a driving focus for so many brands. But I feel that they're doing it for the sake of clout. And what you're doing is a little different because you're using your personal stories, but also bringing in a variety of entrepreneurs to bring their stories to light and humanizing a lot of what they got going on, not only their triumphs, but a lot of their struggles. So I want to kind of start there and get into the origin story of how you got started as a entrepreneur and a podcaster, and also how you brought the brand to life.
Absolutely. I'm sure when listeners hear this, it's probably not incredibly unique, right? The FemmeTrepreneur brand was built out of my struggles with my current, at the time, my current day job, just in feeling like there wasn't a lot of female representation. And if it wasn't the right kind of representation, the right people that you could see as your mentors. And I would have all these side conversations with my really good friend, Ariel Cassidy, who actually is a founder and entrepreneur. She owns the Juice House in New Jersey. And we would have these conversations over these barbecues in the summer about how difficult it was for her to start her business being a female entrepreneur, and how sometimes she felt like she wasn't getting the respect that she deserved. So the two of us in the beginning were like, you know what? Let's just start highlighting these things. Let's start an Instagram page. And we didn't really know what the hell we were doing at the time. So we're like, all right, Instagram, let's just get to social media. And then if we build a following, we'll figure out what we want to do from there. So we started posting certain things on social media. We got a little bit of a following, nothing too crazy, but just sharing unique stories, quotes, things that we found through Google, stuff like that. But I always had a passion for starting a podcast because I had my senior year of high school, I co-hosted a radio show with a really good friend of mine. We were one of the only high schools, I think, in New York State that had a real radio station that broadcasted pretty far, and they had the full room with the microphones, and you got to learn all the technology, and I was so intrigued by it. But after some time, it sort of fell off because I thought, I don't want people to judge me. I feel as if maybe if I do this, people will think I'm weird, or they'll be like, oh, who does she think she is? Like thinking she could talk for hours and hours, but like, who does she think she is? So the feelings of doing that and starting a podcast, starting a radio show, that sort of, was pushed to the back. But then after we started FemmeTrepreneur and the Instagram account, I was like, you know what, this is a great way to really share the stories of female founders and female trailblazers, because then they can talk about it and people can hear them. And, if we incorporated video, then they could see them. So I did have all these sort of thoughts of diving into podcasting. And then once I did that, it sort of took off. And my friend Ariel at the time was basically her role was really just in finding those founders, because she was so well connected in New Jersey through her store, through her juice house. So a lot of the first initial people we interviewed were because of her connections. And that after some time, her juice house blew up. Like now she has, I believe, 3 of them. She's franchising. So her and I made a mutual decision that, I would take off with FemmeRadio and then she would focus on her business, which was the best decision because she's she truly is the full embodiment of the brand. So she can always come back if she wants to. I tell her every day. But yeah, so then the podcast took off, and I was actually battling some. This was probably 2018. So like early 2018, we launched the podcast in January, interviewed a few really great people. But then I was going through some really rough situations at work. So in my 9 to 5, and it gave me sort of the worst case of imposter syndrome, because at the time when I launched the podcast, I was a director of a department. I managed 6 different people. I managed an entire book of business for a whole business. The entire company's clients were in my hands, and I was 26 years old, 25, 26 years old. So I felt like I was at the top, right? The pinnacle of my career. I could only go up from there in my mind. And that didn't happen. I started to get into really rough conversations with my employer. I was looking for raises for my employees. They didn't think they deserved them. It felt like every initiative I tried to push wasn't actually being listened to, wasn't being considered. And so I started to look towards podcasts for a way in which to figure out how to deal with those situations. Maybe someone has some advice for me. So I would listen to shows like the, Girl Boss Radio at the time, and it was great, right? But the people that they were interviewing were CEOs, VPs, people who are worth $1 million, and that's just not, it's not me. It wasn't me in my situation, and I couldn't relate. So it was at that time where I sort of made a motion to say to myself, I'm not going to interview those people before I interview the people who are really at the grassroots, really at the bottom, really working their way to the top. So I'm sort of going in circles here, but yeah, at that time, about like March of 2018, I ended up having sort of what we refer to now as a mutual parting of ways with my employer. So I was unemployed. I was unemployed for 2 months. And during those 2 months, nothing was happening with FemmeRadio because I had the worst imposter syndrome. I felt like, who am I to start telling stories and sharing stories of these entrepreneurs and these business owners when I don't even have a job myself? I just felt like I was not the right person to share those stories. And because of that, I didn't share my own either because I was embarrassed. I was this person who was so proud of my job, so proud of where I was in my career. I'd get compliments all the time. People were always so proud of me. My parents were so proud of me. I didn't even tell my parents that I lost my job. I was really struggling. And finally I ended up getting another job, right? And then I sort of was, one day on the train home from the city, and I was like, how did I just let something that I was so passionate about die because of my fears? And yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but we've had lots of highs and lows, and I mean me, but I've had lots of highs and lows with FemmeRadio. But I always look back to that time where I had interviewed maybe like 4 guests, and then all of a sudden it just died. No episodes for almost like 4 months.
Well, here's a few things I want to take from that, and I kind of want to deconstruct it a bit for the listeners. And the thing about it is that a lot of what you said is a lot of what people deal with all the time. You kind of just reach a tipping point where your personal and what I like to say, your personal and your podcast life collide. Because when you turn on the microphone, you're unleashing your strongest self. You're this host, this media outlet, all these other things. To your point, it's interesting you used imposter syndrome. I think that what happens is that we draw inspiration from so much of the content that we consume that we end up trying to create kind of like a mixture of all of these personalities and all these different media outlets whose content we consume as part of who we are. And I think that the problem at that point is that you kind of get lost in the shuffle because you're too busy being the somebody that everybody wants you to be instead of the somebody that you want to be.
Right.
And to your point, like, as before we started recording, just having to go through a lot of those highs professionally and then kind of just not hitting rock bottom because it can always be worse,
Right.
But I think that getting to that point you kind of, I think, had to search inside yourself and ask yourself if, the juice was worth the squeeze. And
Right.
you did that because obviously we're having this conversation and you're still rocking and rolling with the podcast, but I can see where you kind of get burned out because a lot of people go through it. And the thing about it is, especially in the podcasting space, it's very easy for people to say, hey, just turn on a mic and go. Yeah, that's great. But I always tell people, it's like, listen, talk to me when you pass the 10 episode mark.
Right.
That's when I know you're in it for the long haul, because 10 will become 20, 20 will become 30, 30 have become 50, as in your case. And, I think that's a big driving force. And, something you mentioned, in your bio was a quote, which I want to share with the audience, that you said, I didn't have many female mentors at my company. And at the time it was quite discouraging to not see yourself in any of the executive team members. And that right there is something that countless people, men and women, are dealing with even now, because people, they go and they try to find, guys like Gary V or, different personalities, and they're like, that's who I am. And it's like, no, that's not who you are. It's like a lot of people, you've probably seen this. A lot of people want to say, I want to be the next Steve Jobs. And the funny thing about Steve Jobs is, yeah, he was an innovator, he was a creator, but he was an asshole, like that's the thing. like I love Steve Jobs, I mean, he was a driving force in changing so many aspects of technology. But when you dig into who he was as a person, he was a controlling maniac, great, an amazing human being, but still an asshole, And I think that's one of the toughest parts that a lot of creators bump into, that they're so busy trying to be everybody else that they kind of get in their own way.
No, you're right about that. And that's a really good point that you just brought up, the part of my bio, because that was the biggest thing that I struggled with. Was obviously I was growing the FemmeTrepreneur brand, and at my day job at the time, there was probably one female VP, and I was so excited, growing in that career, because I aspired to be just like her. She was that lone soldier, and I couldn't wait to get, to her level so I could join her in all her success. And she'd been there for so long. And then when I finally started working with her, I was like, wow, you really don't care about anyone, but yourself. And that was really hard for me, because to me, success is not me climbing up the top, to the top of the ladder. It's the people you bring with you, the people you see succeed with you. And when I was a director, I had 5 women working for me. And to this day, I'm still super close with every single one of them. And I love when they find success. And I love when they're climbing the ladder. I love when they're getting promoted. I love when they're enjoying what they're doing. And if they're not, I'm helping them fix their resumes. I'm helping them find jobs that work for them. I'm going on calls to, make reference calls for them, because that's what's meaningful to me. So it was very heartbreaking to see that, you could be so jaded throughout your career. And then you might change. Like, I don't believe that she was always like that. I believe that she came in just like I did, very naive about what the workspace was. And then she changed, she became that person. And it was very much one of those situations where I had to do it this way, so you should have to do it this way. And that's just not how I believe, because we have to leave the world a better place than how we found it. And that's just, her methodology was not in sync with mine.
Well, I think it was one of those, the time honored phrase of never meet your heroes.
Right, precisely.
because you know what it is, your heroes, you hold them to a higher standard.
Right.
And the thing about it is that, yeah, you hold them to that higher standard, but are they holding themselves to that higher standard? And based on what you're saying, this individual was not, because she realized, and you might agree with this, like, you're in an industry or in a company that's dominated by men, and you're, the cliche is you're the sum of the 5 people you spend your most time with. So if you spend your most time with, sharks, what are you going to become?
Right.
So,
and that's, yeah, you're right. You're 100% right.
So, based on what you're describing, I kind of feel that that's the direction it went. But to add to what you're doing, the thing about it is that nobody should have to forcefully become that in order to thrive in the workplace. Like, what I'm saying is that for the fact that we're still having conversations about equal pay between men and women, or equal opportunities between men and women, I think that there's a very weird fascination with wanting to put labels on that stuff. Like,
yeah.
She's the first female referee. How about she's just a referee that happens to be a woman?
Right.
Like, I think that there's so much forced necessity to make it. Oh, we got to make it about labels. Like, why can't you just be, a ref or a head coach, or, we'll use something that's perfectly relevant to current events. Vice president. Why can't you just be vice president?
Right.
Oh, it's the first female vice president. Let's all cheer. Okay, great. But at the end of the day, it's, do you have the skills, and can you do your damn job?
Right. And sometimes I think that that's the sort of issue when people say things, and when the media sort of comes out with like the first female ever to do this,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it completely takes away from the fact that they have a laundry list of credentials that, that make them fully capable, and even more so capable to do that job. And I'll never forget, it was, what was Erica Nardini, when she was getting hired at Barstool. I've followed her career for a while, because she's someone that I eventually would like to interview, because I do think the inner workings there are quite interesting. But when she was first hired at Barstool, that's all anyone ever paid attention to, right? Meanwhile, they hired her because she was truly the best fit for the job, and she had a CVS receipt of credentials that, said that she was fully capable to do this job. She was the perfect culture fit, and she was ready to take on the role, and all anybody ever cared about was, like, they're making a, gender hire because they're trying to look better.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that to me is just so degrading to her career and who she is as an individual. But I actually interviewed someone on FemmeRadio, Marissa Beth Orr. She wrote the book Lean Out. So it was kind of like the rebuttal to Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. And I really loved it, because it's more in line with my version of what I want the world to be, where it's, I feel like on one end, there's all these women that are like, you have to, aspire to be a CEO, aspire to be this, aspire to be that. You can do it all. You could be mom and, climb the ranks and be this trailblazer. But what if you just want to be mom?
Yep.
You're allowed to just be mom, and you shouldn't have to feel bad that you want to just be a mom, because just being a mom is pretty fucking incredible. I don't know if I could curse, but pretty incredible. So I hate that it sort of seems as like, you're just a stay-at-home mom. Like, no, you are a mom. That is your job. That is your role. And you should hold that proudly. But there's such a stigma in society where, if you're not doing work and personal and all these other things, if you don't have all these side hustles, then you're not succeeding. And no, that is not the case at all.
It's true. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. And again, the fact that, here we are in 2021 now, like having to justify, the norms that should be clearly the definition is the norms, the normal should be something that nobody should be making such a big deal about. Like, it shouldn't be the first female this, or the first Latino this, or the first African American. Like, there's no necessity for that. At the end of the day, can you do the job? Do you have the tools? And can you do the best version of the job expected by those around you? That's it.
Absolutely. It does scare me sometimes when I see those headlines, because it is a rude awakening that, wow, we're, in 2021 now, and there's still a first for something.
Yep.
So that is, I like to know those things, because it really helps to also shed a light on the fact that we're not as progressive as we think we are as a society.
Yes.
But it certainly does, in my opinion, it certainly does take away from the fact that they do have the records that show they could absolutely do the job that they're doing. And by just calling them the first this and the first that, people don't typically click into the article and read why they're the first, why they were able to break those glass ceilings or, shatter that, that particular race wall at that company, which there are so many of.
Yep. It's a scary concept that so much of the labels are a necessity for validation. Like,
right.
like, okay, you're applying for a job and hey, you got to put what race or ethnicity are you? And it's funny because you were talking about not working. Like, I got laid off and I'm back in the pool after 20 years. And I'm saying to myself, why do you care what color I am? Like,
right.
like just legit, like I'm filling it out or doing the application. Like, why does it matter? Is there a checklist? Hey, we need 3 browns, 2 greens, and a purple. like it's just a very weird thing. And like you said, the fact that in 2021 there's still so many firsts that we were embracing now, it boggles my mind.
Right. And to consider the fact that they also, on those applications, they include that section because it's supposed to help them make better, diverse choices. And clearly it hasn't been working.
Nope.
And that's what bothers me is you have a way to make more of an effort as a business to be more diverse and you're still not doing it. So that has always bothered me because every single job you apply to has that questionnaire, right? But still, you walk into those offices and they're predominantly white or they're, predominantly male or et cetera, et cetera. And it's funny because you had every level of assistance to make, diverse choices. But I would hope that you at least interviewed, a number of different people to at least like get some diversity of thought. But that's a work in progress, I would say. As
I do have one thing to add to that, and then we can go into some other stuff. Do you feel, especially being involved in client services, working in a male dominated industry, plus just being now a creator and an entrepreneur, do you sometimes find that people kind of want to pass on the other side of the spectrum? Meaning, like you're an entrepreneur, you're driving a lot of messages towards women, and do you sometimes feel that when you're talking to certain women that they come at you, like I said, looking for some validation or something that they shouldn't be doing just based on the fact that, oh, you're a woman, you understand? Do you run into that?
Let's see.
You know what I'm saying? Like I'll give you an example. Like if you're from another country and you go into a place that has people from your country employed there and they talk to you in your native language, and they kind of feel more comfortable because you're one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. So I think in the beginning, I think I've gotten in the last 3 years sort of more progressive. I was very much like in the middle as far as feminism goes, because I kind of feel as though the blanket term of feminism has really only benefited a particular type of woman in past years. So I don't think it encompasses, women of color and different cultures and ethnicities. So I have had a lot of situations where many women will come up to me and talk to me about certain situations and things that have happened to them. And I always listen. I always listen. But I can say that I've had situations that have been very, very inappropriate at my, previous places of employment. I've had situations where I probably could have made out like a bandit had I pursued,
right.
but I didn't, because at the end of the day, my mental was just like, get out of here, self-preservation,
yep.
and figure yourself out. But there are a lot of situations where women will talk to me about things, and it's hard to distinguish what some people are trying to get out of certain situations. And I guess that's like, it's hard for me to always empathize, because growing up, I was always taught to just like listen, internalize, then figure out what you want to do. But there are people whose like immediate reaction is to, react. Right. And that's a little difficult. It's hard to sort of navigate what I'm trying to say here.
No, well, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
I'll spin it a different way. Do you feel that having so many female entrepreneurs that you spoke to, that sometimes you see that there are people that it's kind of like you become what you become what you hate. You know what I mean? Like what we were talking about with your vice president, where it's like, hey, I'm doing this, but I'm a woman that's trying to succeed, so it's okay. You know what I mean? Like they're searching for that validation.
Yeah. The playing the game aspect is really infuriating. It's also incredibly hurtful to the next generation of people who are coming up the ladder.
There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Now you got it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating. But I see it too with men, right? Like I've worked in places where I vibe so well with certain men and they're amazing. And then after some time they change because they start playing the game, the men's game, right? And because there are multiple different personalities at work. If you're a good person, you're a good person, right?
Yep.
And you are very different than the sharks that you sit at the top or sit within you, right? But you'll see people start to shift. And that's just something I think I caught myself many years ago. I was almost a product of this shift. And I went to sleep one night and I was like, there's no way that they're trying to make me do this tomorrow. They were actually trying to make me terminate someone that I really thought was a great employee. But because, this person didn't fit with what they felt that, they should look like in terms of just like, I'm sure you can infer what that means.
Yeah, a window dressing higher.
Right, exactly. Like, like she doesn't wear heels and dresses every day.
Yep.
She wears, leggings and sweaters. Like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, I should fire her because she, is wearing a fall attire instead of a spring. Okay, got that. Yep. So I went to bed that night and I was like, there's no way I can do this. Like, I don't agree with this. I don't believe this. But when I left work that day, I was like, okay, yeah, this, whatever. And then on my drive home, I'm like crying. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to do this. This is the worst decision we could ever make. And then I walked into the office that next morning and I went right into management. And I was like, yeah, what we talked about yesterday, I don't agree with. And I felt so powerful. And it was sort of in that moment that I realized I'm not cut out for what they are doing. And it's not that I'm not cut out to be management. I'm just not cut out to be that level of management. And I will never be that level of management. But it is frustrating because I've seen times where maybe if I had played the game, my career would be wildly different right now. Right. I don't regret any of the decisions to not participate in those things. But it's incredibly hurtful. And I actually used to, so I'll share just a small anecdote. So, and hopefully he doesn't get mad at me for sharing, but my boyfriend's Black and we actually used to work together. And there was a few different occasions where things were said around him and he wanted so badly to say something, he wanted so badly to speak up and to address the issues that had been taking place. And he didn't, right? He was an entry level employee. He didn't want to lose his job. And it was definitely one of those companies that, you upset them, then they're going to probably start to see you in a different light. And then, after some time, you'll suddenly be terminated and they'll be like, oh, his performance was just lacking, they'll make up some, stupid excuse. But there was a number of times where he sat there and we would have conversations and he's like, I don't play the game and I'll never play the game, especially when it comes to things like this. And that was very moving to me because it also shifted my structure. Like, why should someone have to completely change and alter their morals to fit an antiquated structure?
Yep.
That's just it's not right.
Yep. It brings about what we were talking about earlier, the Steve Jobs model. Oh, I want to be the next. Like, nope, can't do that. It's not going to work.
Exactly.
That worked at that time for that person. And the thing about it is that when you're at that level and you're navigating the corporate world, you bump into that so often. And it really is a conversation with yourself where it's like, do I need this job? Do I want this job? Do I have to put up with this to endure this job? And that's the problem. I think that when you're saying to yourself, I have to endure this job, you've already lost at that point.
Absolutely.
Because if you have to endure anything, and you just dread waking up in the morning, or dread punching in, or that commute to work, you're just like, then why do it? You know?
And that would be if if I could give a small key takeaway on certain things, especially in your early 20s, as you're first stepping into the workforce. I know it's a huge priority to party and go out with your friends and enjoy your weekends, but please, for the love of God, save your money. Give yourself an emergency fund, give yourself a cushion, so that if you do have these horrible instances at work where you're being mistreated, or you start to see that your mental is taking a hit. I mean, I was enduring a year and a half of what I would refer to as workplace abuse, and I couldn't leave because I had been so lackadaisical with my money that I didn't have a cushion. And if I had had a cushion, I literally would have walked right out of that office and told everybody to go to hell, and I would have bounced. But I didn't. And that was a huge fear. I had an apartment to pay for. I didn't, asking my parents for money would have been probably the most, the worst thing in my mind, because it would have meant that I wasn't as successful as I thought I was. But save your money, give yourself that cushion, so that if you do need to make some sort of a drastic decision, you're doing it with some level of intelligence, that you have the ability to sustain yourself. And then you can actively look for jobs. And, if it's a non-COVID job market, you'll be able to find one, right? But the market right now is a little hectic, so I don't exactly encourage anyone, if you have a stable job, to leave. But
I'm speaking from personal experience. It's not pretty out there. But I wanted to kind of bring that full circle, because you touched on a lot of things in your bio that I said, I kind of want to dig into that, because it's funny. We're talking about, the tools that are part of your business, and the stuff that's part of your business. And I think that your experiences are part of your business.
Right.
So, I kind of wanted to really dig into that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about when FemmeRadio started. What was that first day like when you recorded your first episode? Where were you? What gear did you use? What was the feeling when you hit that stop button after you recorded your first episode?
That's a funny story. So when I first decided to do the podcast, I actually had DM'd someone I went to college with, who had his own podcast, just to ask him how he had been doing it. And he pretty much said, I just record into my cell phone. I think said he was using Anchor, and he just records into his cell phone. But I actually was very lucky at the time, because I didn't really have any money to, buy anything exactly. But my dad is very, very into music. He actually plays the accordion, and he had his own little, I wouldn't say music studio, because it wasn't like soundproof or anything, but he had a little music area in his office, and he had a microphone and, all of the mechanics, all the tech. So I just basically stole like a blue microphone from him. And I was like, thanks. Thanks for donating to FemmeTrepreneur and all of our endeavors. See you later. And I just went running out the door, and he was like, what the hell are you doing?
Oh, man.
But so I was basically equipped with a microphone and a laptop. And then I'm pretty sure I also, if I'm not mistaken, I stole, oh my God, I'm like a klepto. I stole his Beats headphones. He had these red Beats headphones. So I took those too. And again, I was like, thank you so much for donating to FemmeTrepreneur. You're a gem. And I ran out the door. But yeah, so all I had was the headphones, a microphone, and my laptop, and I was recording on a free program, Audacity. And to this day, when now everything obviously runs through Gotham Podcast Studio. Thank God, bless the broken road that led me to them. But that was pretty much all I was using, which is sort of a lot of the, I did an episode last year where I was talking just about how you can jump into podcasting and it doesn't have to cost you much. Yep. I always say investing in a good microphone is a great idea. But again, this person was recording through their cell phone, and I couldn't tell when I was listening to his episodes. If you're in a quiet area, if you can lock yourself off from the rest of the world, your audio will be great. But I always say just invest in a microphone. There's microphones on Amazon for like $30. There's always something you could save up for and get. But Audacity was free. I load everything right now through Anchor, and I didn't pay anything for that either. There's a lot of things that you could do that are super, super cost effective. I have been doing a lot of research recently on additional, because now that we're sort of remote more and I don't travel into the city as much, I want to get a better setup for dual person interviews. So I've been doing some research on things like that, but I haven't quite pulled the trigger. So happy to get your advice on anything you think I should get.
Absolutely. It's funny because the way you started is exactly how it went. Now, for many people, I mean, I think I started with a Logitech headset mic and Audacity, which I still edit in occasionally. So, Audacity remains a huge cosign for myself and for many podcasters. Like, listen, it's free. It does the job and you'll get it. Trust me.
Right.
One thing I wanted to ask with that was, so you got the equipment, you went home, you hit record, you did that first episode, you hit publish, you uploaded it. What'd you feel after you did that first one?
Oh, I was so excited. I felt like this is exactly what I was what I was meant to be doing. I've always loved talking. I mean, you could have me on here for 12 hours and I'd be nonstop talking. My boyfriend really enjoys my company. I promise. But that's my thing is I love talking. I love getting people's stories. I love sharing stories. So after we recorded that first episode, because it was a co-episode with my friend Ariel, because she was still a part of the show at that time.
Yep.
And the two of us were in a WeWork space in Manhattan. We had actually just done a day's worth of photo shoots for the brand. So we were taking pictures, some of which are still on my website now, because, I need to revamp some photos here and there, but we did a full day photo shoot in the city. And then we sat down and we're like, let's just bang out, a 30-minute episode, just give people a quick intro into what we're going to do. And I still have to ask her how she felt afterwards, but for me, I was rejuvenated. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I was meant to do. I can feel that this is going to be big. Like, that's how I felt in my mind at the time. I was very naive in thinking that, if I just launch this live, everyone will listen. Because there's still so many people who are only now diving into podcasting, but
yep.
I was listening to podcasts well before I started podcasting. So I've always been very into talk radio and things like that.
How'd your parents take it when you said you were going to start doing this? Did they listen to the first episode? What did they tell you when you told them you went on down this endeavor? And I'm asking because I know, and I've seen that you have a very close relationship with them. So
yes.
I did want to ask that because sometimes the people closest to us can either be our best friends or our worst critics.
Right. So that's a great question. So my parents are, and I don't know if you know this, but my parents are immigrants from Portugal. So they came here when they were 24, 21. My mom was 24. My dad was about 21. So they've sort of been very, I think I'd say for the last 40 years, very heads down, tunnel vision work. Mm-hmm. Their extent of technology is very, very low. They're actually moving into a new home that my dad's been building. My dad does construction, and my brother was teaching them over the last couple of weeks how to open the garage door through their cell phones. And they're just so amazed by how technology is going and moving. But when I obviously they know that I have the podcast. They know that I interview all these people. They know that I work on it almost 24/7 because, she'll call me every night. And I'll be like, I'm doing some work. And she'll be like, work or podcast work.
There you go.
And I'll be like, podcast work. So they know that I have it. But I don't even know that they've actually listened to a full episode of the show. But my mom will crack me up sometimes because she'll ask, how many views? And I'm like, well, it's listeners, but I get it.
Nice. It's interesting, too, because I'll throw a personal anecdote in there. It's like in my house. Like my grandmother will come upstairs to see my daughter and she'll come into my home office and she'll be like, "What are those lights for? What is that thing on your desk? The mixer on my desk, or what is this?" Like, I'm like, I've been doing this for like more than 10 years, and they're gonna either think I'm Batman or I'm a terrorist, one of the two, because it's like, why does he have all these electronic things in there? What are all these flashing lights? What is all this stuff going on and off? I mean, like, my brother kind of has an idea, but for the most part, I just don't go out of my way to hold up a sign that says, "Hey, I'm doing this." So it's what led me to ask you that question, because, like I said, you have such a close relationship with your family that I was curious just to see how, quote unquote, the other side lives.
Yes. But you know what? It is I think there are some things that really resonate across the board. And I feel like a lot of, kids in general will get this, but I feel like a lot of children of immigrants definitely will understand this, where, there's a certain level of validation amongst the group, amongst your parents and their friends. If it's something that they can brag about and it's, and it's widely known, then it's like, woo, you're the best, like, greatest kid ever. Yep. So when I was featured in Forbes in April, in Forbes Women, that was something that they were like, "Oh, wow, okay." Like, they couldn't tell you how many episodes I had. They couldn't tell you who I've interviewed. They couldn't even tell you what the show was about. But I was featured in Forbes, so that's all that matters.
Yep, that's the name of the game. It's like, hey, there's a million types of tissue, but everybody knows Kleenex. So right. it's like Forbes is Forbes. Like, that's it.
Right. So that's actually one of my I'm very big on goal setting. So a few weeks ago, obviously at the beginning of the year, I sat down and I wrote down some of my goals, and that's one of them actually is to be featured on some podcasts. So you really helped tick that one off the list real quick.
Well, it's funny, and a little inside baseball. When I interviewed Brianna from Gotham, I said to myself, I really like what they're doing. I thought that it's a great idea. And I kind of just went down that rabbit hole. And then after the interview came out, you started following me. And I'm usually really weird with just like following other people that follow me. Number one, because it's like, if it doesn't resonate, if there's not something that the person's doing, like, I just don't want to be one of those, like, I don't want to be looking through your window, so to speak. Like,
no, I agree with you.
Oh, hey, that's a great picture of your dog. Let me just like it. Like it's not genuine. So I'm like, oh, she's a New Yorker. She got a cool vibe. And then I started following the brand, when you did your merch drop, which we'll talk about. I'm like, yo, her hustle is legit. So I'm like, she's not playing. And then just little anecdotes, little things. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of, that New York vibe that brings all of us together. And I was like, you know what? I want to get in there and put her story out there. And then seeing a lot of the stuff that you were going through and the work that you were putting in, I said to myself, I'm like, she gets it,
Yeah. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I agree with you as far as the following thing goes. I will, I like to be able to, I feel like Instagram is just like my mutual source of motivation sometimes. Right. So I like to follow people that are, on the same page, especially when it comes to fem. I'll follow almost every single person that follows me back if they talk about work in their Instagram. Right. So if I feel like you're being transparent about, like, it, just like you said, about your hustle, about the things that you're doing, your day to day, et cetera, then I'll follow you, because I feel like I could get something out of that partnership. I'll learn something. It'll be a good source of motivation. So I'm big on that as well.
Now, and speaking of Gotham, how did you get to that point with them? How did that relationship come about?
Well, let me just say, I'm obsessed with Gotham Podcast Studio, and I love Brianna. I think she really is, again, the embodiment of my brand. Like, it just is someone who, with her husband, they were like, oh, you know what? We got to do this. And then it blew up, and not even blew up, but they just were nonstop working for it to get to that point. Yep. But I found the studio because I didn't really love the way that my own episodes were sounding. And I wanted to bring more of a real podcasting environment to the show. And a lot of the reasoning behind it was more to get video incorporated. I wanted to give more of like a YouTube series-esque type of vibe to some of my shows. And I was looking up places and I couldn't believe the costs, like the cost associated with recording out of some of these New York City studios. And it was just bananas. I'm like, what do you mean it's $150 for an hour? Is that a joke? $150? Like I can't spend that. I couldn't even fathom spending that. And then I came across Gotham through Google. I was just doing like a Google search and I saw the rate. I'm like, okay, 60 is more manageable. I'm like, okay, the member rate. All right. And then when I went in to interview with them, not it's necessarily interview with them, but like to do like a walkthrough. I believe I was sitting with one of their producers, Raul, at the time. And I said to him, I was like, I have a female centered brand. So how difficult would it be to get a female in the producer seat while I'm recording, you know? And I don't do much for as far as like the editing with them. I do all of that on my own. But as far as someone to like be there to moderate the show and make sure the audio levels are good, I wanted it to be a female. And they actually did have a female engineer. So that kind of enticed me. And then he goes, but also like not only a female engineer, but our co-founder is a woman. And I was like, all right, where do I sign? Like, how do I become a member? What do you need? Because that's been my mission all along, is to make sure that if I have someone designing my logo, it's a woman. If I have someone incorporated with photography, you know, if I have someone on a shoot with me, it's a woman. So I'm trying to not just, you know, talk about it. I'm trying to be about it. Right. And that was a huge selling point for me, without a doubt.
Nice. And you've, since obviously now with COVID, are you still going in there? Or are you just focusing on doing the shows at home now?
So I do everything. They have a really good system to just set up the virtual recordings. And I actually really like that because I had one moment where I just forgot to hit record on an episode, and, you know, God bless Selena Fletcher for being an absolute gem, but she actually re-recorded the whole thing with me a second time.
Wow.
But I know. And that was like episode 35. So I don't know how I forgot. 2 years of not making a mistake like that. And then I make a mistake like that. And thankfully she was really, really kind about it. But in that moment, I'm like, I'm not doing this by myself anymore. I need someone else to get some eyes on this. So they do the virtual sessions with me. I used to live in Queens before COVID hit. So it was much easier for me to just like jump on a quick subway ride and get into the city. Right. But now I'm in the suburbs now. But once it's safer and once I'm vaccinated, I'll be on that train right in, because I miss Manhattan so much. But yeah, I mean, as far as interviewing her, obviously I knew who she was because I had seen her in the studio, right? And I had known of her from the emails and things like that. So I just slid right on into the DMs. Yep. And I was like, hey, come on my show.
Now, what's the home rig like now?
So it's actually funny because I'm on the house hunt. So every home that I look at, I'm like, wow, I can't wait to turn this into my future studio. But right now it's pretty much intermixed with my 9-to-5 mess. But we've got my laptop set up. We've got my microphone. We're fortunately very lucky that we live in a really quiet neighborhood. So there's never really any outside noise that we hear. So I'm very lucky for that. But I also have a standing desk. So sometimes it's easier for me to podcast standing up because I feel like I'm more like moving.
Huh. You know, it's weird. I've always kind of looked at them, but the standing desk, but I just have way too much stuff in here. And I'm like, I don't know if that'll work.
I know. I get nervous that there's too much weight on it sometimes.
Yep. That's exactly it. I mean, I redid, but when I was still working my 9-to-5, when working from home, you know, I'm like, I'm going to redo my home office. And I did a giant U-shaped desk. Like I put 3 desks together from IKEA, so I could have like studio on one. If I had a guest here, they could sit there. And now it's actually my daughter's seat. She sits there with her iPad. She's like my secretary in here now.
Oh, so, I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So it's a kind of unofficially become her desk, but it's interesting because now that you're working from home, do you feel more creative when you're working from home, or did you like the split focus of the 9 to 5 and then just coming home and doubling down on your business?
I think it's a little bit of both for me. I actually really appreciated having that commute into work because sometimes that's where most of my ideas came from. So I would write things down on my notepad in my phone, or I would, physically write them down in my journal. But now it's a it's a little bit of it's a little bit of both for me. So I feel like when I was going into the office, I was able to compartmentalize a little bit better. So, you're walking into the office. Now it's your 9 to 5 time. Now you mentally check out of everything else and you focus on this. And then the minute you leave, you could focus on FemmeRadio, you could focus on FemmeTrepreneur. But what I'm finding now is that everything sort of weaves into each other, which I'm trying to avoid for a number of different reasons. But on a perfect day, I'm a morning person. So on a perfect day, I'd wake up early and do work for my podcast before the work day. And then the minute the work day starts, I check in and push everything else to the side. But I do feel like it's been a little more difficult working remotely to separate the two things.
Now, do you feel it's that way because you're easier? It's easier for you to get distracted, or just because the environment you're in?
I think the environment that I'm in it almost motivates me to work on my podcast a little bit more.
Right.
because it's my office, right? And then I have a little sign here that says FemmeTrepreneur headquarters. So there's things that motivate me to want to work on something that I consider a passion of mine that I'd love to turn into something, bigger and better down the line. But I think it has a lot to do with just the environment that I'm in.
Now, before we move into the next thing, I wanted to talk about your merch drop, because that was some legit guerrilla marketing on your part. And I said to myself, that was like the tipping point on wanting to do an episode more so, because I'm like, yo, she's really just wearing it, putting it out there, sending stuff out, making cool packaging. Like you put all the bells and whistles into it. So I want to kind of talk about your initial wave of merch, and also, what brought that about, and what was your thought process in just picking the pieces, picking the colors, just the overall campaign.
Yes. So I have to say the merch is by far one of the coolest things I've done in a very, very, very long time. I love the aspect of having a physical product in my hand and then packaging it and putting, like, it sounds corny, but putting my heart and soul into it, and then someone purchasing it. I mean, the fact that people were willing to spend money on something that I made was completely beyond me. The first wave of merch that I did, which was about June this past year, so in the summer, it was initially something that I really wanted to do, obviously, because it's always been my dream to, like, my dream in my life is to be like walking through an airport and seeing someone wearing something that says FemmeRadio, or, that This Girl Can merch. That would be my dream. To just see someone completely random, having something that's mine. So that was always something I wanted to do, but I didn't really know how to go about it. And it's a lot of overhead that you have to pay for to do a launch like that. So I was Googling what the costs would be. I was Googling, direct to consumer. I was Googling manufacturers, things like that. And it just all felt very overwhelming. And then I came across a site called Teespring. So if you guys are at all looking to do something merch related and you are nervous that, you don't know if anyone will actually buy anything, I thought Teespring was a really great way to approach it at first, because they have their in-house stock merch. So it's like hoodies, t-shirts, long sleeves, and they do like beach towels, tote bags, things like that. So it is a really sort of I would say, diverse amount of products that you could choose from. And then if you work with either a designer on your end, or maybe you're good at designing and you put a logo together, they allow you to upload your logo into the system, design your clothing, and then actually publish it to a storefront of your own. And you can set the pricing. And then all that happens is once you launch your site live, once you launch your storefront live, people can come and purchase those items and you don't even see it, right? So it goes right to that person's doorstep, and then you get your money, and then Teespring gets their money. And it's all very upfront. So at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the publishing, you'll know, okay, Teespring's getting $17, I'm getting $21 based on how you price your item.
Right.
So I thought that was really easy to just like get it off the ground, see if there's any interest. Will people even buy this shit? Like, who knows?
Right.
But I did work with a good friend of mine, Christy Freer. She does Creations with Chris on Instagram. Little short plug there. But I worked with her, and she put together some really great concepts and just some cool usage of like things that I was thinking about for my logo, and then things that she was also thinking about for a female-centered brand. So I used some of them as like the initial concepts, and I launched them, and they actually sold. You know, people were buying things.
Yep.
So I ended up saving that money and saying, okay, this next round, I'm going to do something more hands-on. I want to see the clothing after it's printed. I want to be able to fold it, put it in with like stickers, and, you know, make it more of a fun experience for the end user when they're getting the product, you know, make it more personal. So then I worked with, well, it's actually kind of a funny story because my friend from college, Alyssa Nardone, she runs Dyed New York, the Instagram page, and she actually reached out to me and said, I'm looking to do a collab, and I think like you and I should collab on a launch. And at that time, I was already thinking about phase 2. So it actually worked out perfectly. And she was able to put me in touch with a screen printer that her friend of hers uses. So we were working with Sparkles Corp in like right upstate, maybe like 30 minutes up north from where I am right now. So I can't really say it's upstate. It's like upper Westchester County. But I was working with them to screen print the logos, and then she got the merchandise and dyed the clothes, like bleach dyed it, and then did like the pink tie dye. And it was in that moment that I realized this was the best decision because, and I'm probably skipping a few steps, so keep me honest here, but it was in that moment that I was like, this is the best decision that I could have made, because when I was holding those hoodies and the crew necks in my hand, I'm like, this is the coolest feeling ever. Like, this is my merch. And then when I launched it, I decided to do it through Etsy, and I couldn't believe it. My phone was buzzing. I mean, we only had maybe like 35 hoodies and crew necks. So it wasn't a lot of stock to get through to sell out, but right. You know, you got to start small. I don't recommend people buying like 200 items up front and then just sitting with inventory for a month and a half.
No.
But it was, when my phone started buzzing, it was like, this is sold and that is sold. You don't have any more extra larges. You don't have any more larges. I was freaking out. I wish I had videos of me dancing around my living room.
No, I remember when you were like, I only have one medium left. And I'm like, oh man, she must be super hype right now. So, you know, see, like I said, peering through the window, watching the story. That's awesome. That's a tremendous feeling. And I actually wanted to touch on that because, like I said, I'm sure other people have been contemplating that and what goes into it. And, you know, you being so transparent is very refreshing. I appreciate that.
It surprisingly was, I do think that I made the right decision with doing Teespring first and then saving that money and applying it towards the phase 2 of my merch launch, which was more of an upgraded, right? Like an upgraded launch. And I'm planning phase 3 for around March or April. And for that one, it'll be, I'm always looking to upgrade from launch to launch to launch. So I think for phase 3, I'm going to do maybe some upgraded materials of the clothing, and then also including not necessarily accessories, but I'm big on journaling. So I want to include a journal, you know, something where people can actually start to make more of an effort to document how they're feeling and things like that, because it's very important to me. And I feel like it helps keep me centered. So I want to include journals and things like that, and just cute stuff that you could spruce up your desk with, and it keeps you, motivated, stuff like that. Things that like excite me. I'm trying to incorporate into future launches.
Nice. All right. So we're gonna go into the next segment of the show, which is the hot seat. Series of rapid fire questions. You kind of know what the deal is. Of course, questions are always tailored to each guest. So we're gonna get things started with a nice easy one. Tell me about when you first got Sophie.
Oh my God, Sophie. Oh, I just love her so much. No, okay, so she was a really, really bad puppy, like probably the worst. I should have sent her away for training, and I just was convinced that she would end up behaving, and she didn't until she was about like 2.5, 3 years old. But yeah, I mean, she's a gem. She's the cutest thing in the world, and now all she does is just cuddle and snuggle with everybody, and I wouldn't trade her for the world. She's so cute.
Nice. Now, how'd you decide to get a dog? How'd that come about?
So I had a Cavalier Poodle mix. So I had a Cavapoo, and I was traveling a lot for work at the time. So my parents were watching him. And then one day when I went home to get him, my dad was like, "Oh, that's funny. You think this is your dog?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, like I paid for him. Like he's been my dog." And my parents were like, "No, he should stay with us. Like we have a backyard. You live in a small apartment." And they guilted the hell out of me. And they made me feel like he would live a much better life with them.
Oh, man.
And I mean, I can't lie, knowing it's been 6 years since that happened. And it's true. He's living a much better life with them than he would have lived with me. But yeah, so that happened. So I had to, I gave them my dog begrudgingly. And 2 years later, I thought to myself, dogs are necessary to me. It's like mental health. They help with emotional stress and all things like that. And I sort of pulled the trigger on her and just got her. And although she was a menace for 2 years, she's like, I wouldn't have made it through this year without her. She's truly the best. We don't deserve animals.
Well, the reason I also wanted you to share that story is because look at it this way. Your parents paid you for the dog by giving you the equipment to start the show.
Exactly. That's so true.
There you go.
Oh my God. If they listen to this, they'll be like, yeah, he's right.
There you go. What are 3 mobile apps you can't live without?
Okay. So I would say, I'm thinking from like the morning when I wake up. I am probably clicking onto my Google Calendar all the time. So I keep everything in my calendar. Like my entire day is planned from the minute I wake up. So the calendar I can't live without. Oh my God. For business purposes, I would say Canva. Canva is a big thing. And I would say, obviously, all joking aside, Instagram. It's how I keep my business floating. So I would say it's probably one of my top apps. Although a close fourth would be TikTok, because I'm finding a lot of comedy on TikTok lately. It's a really good app. I can't lie.
Yeah. There's a lady on there that does like skits. I'm going to send you one of her skits because I said Melissa would probably want this lady on her podcast.
Please do. I love all the creators.
Her vibe is like the way she comes off is because it's usually like people who try and like say stuff to her. And the internet, as much as it's a great place and an informative place, it's a toxic cesspool sometimes. And she responds to some of these people's comments about like politics and different things, and I'm just like, this lady's not even playing. Like
please do.
Yeah, she comes out swinging, and I said, yeah, she might like this lady. But I'll send that to you later. Favorite piece of tech besides your phone or computer?
Oh gosh. Favorite piece of tech besides phone or computer? Oh my God, this is supposed to be rapid fire. Melissa, get it together. I would say do like, oh God, this isn't really tech, but like, do kitchen utensils count?
Absolutely. Yeah, tech is tech.
Like my KitchenAid mixer, I'm just obsessed with it.
Really? Do you bake?
it's literally when I got it, I think I shed a tear. Yeah, so I bake, but I also, it's like perfect for just like mixing things. And I have like the attachments for like the food processor and like the pastas. I've invested heavily into my KitchenAid mixer.
Yeah, I know. I see you share your little meals. Like, look what I made. I'm like, ah,
I
there she goes.
I always grew up with people that cook. I always considered my mom like a 5-star chef. She used to cook every night. And so I've always liked to cook, but this year I definitely figured out how to cook. So it's been a good year.
Well, it's interesting also because of everything that's been going on. It's like people have taken the opportunity to, to augment their skill set. So, you saying that it's 100% true.
Right. No, I agree with that.
Do you listen to music when you work?
I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do like listening to music. Right now I'm kind of on a Jasmine Sullivan kick. But as far as podcasts go, I'm sort of in that category of people that really deep dive, I should say, into crime.
Really?
Big crime podcast junkie. I can't lie. I wish I wasn't so invested, but yeah, my boyfriend will walk into the room sometimes and be like, "Why? Why do you listen to this?"
Which one are you listening? Which ones are you listening to now?
So right now I'm going through Dateline, but I used to do, which Dateline is like, it's a TV show and they pretty much just transferred it into a podcast. So it's nothing too incredible, but I used to listen to Once Upon a Crime a lot. Was big on that. And sometimes I will, cause I have like a good dual monitor setup. So I'll watch like a documentary or something while I work, which is, it sounds like it distracts you, but I more just listen. So it's not really a distraction for me, but some people are kind of confused with how I could successfully do that.
It's funny because you share also a lot of reality TV stuff, and
Oh yeah.
I laugh because you're like, oh, this reality show and then crime shows, and my wife and I, we went to see my father-in-law in Florida, and we're in this house and he just has the TV on, and it's like, Mary Sullivan may have killed her husband, may have chopped him up. We're going to find out why. And it was just an entire day from like noon till like 8 o'clock of, Maria Sanchez is on the run, possibly for killing her parents. What made her do it? And I'm just like, hearing, like seeing a lot of your updates with that stuff. That's all I think about, like those type of things. And I'm like, yo, the fact that he played that stuff all day, and you saying how it's you're obsessed with it, I can understand that, because if you listen to it long enough, like when we came back, like either that would be playing or like Blue Bloods, the TV show, and now my wife watches Blue Bloods, and I'm just like, what is happening?
That's so funny. You know what? I don't understand what it is about it that intrigues me so much, but I think it's always I don't love to listen to the unsolved murders or the unsolved cases. I like when it has a beginning and an end, because I like the process of how the detectives figure out who did it and, all of that coming together. But the unsolved ones, I can't lie, do kind of creep me out sometimes, especially the more recent ones, because I'm just like, they're still out there.
Yep, they're still creeping around. What or who has made the biggest impression on your life in the last year?
Whew. Oh man.
Come on, I'm not playing.
Damn, you really thought about these. Crap. Okay. What or who has made the biggest impression? You know what? I'm going to say, and I hope people don't judge me for my corny answer, but I'm going to say my boyfriend, which is obviously not female, of course, but I think just with everything that's been going on this year, specifically all things surrounding race, I've just learned so much, and he's really taken the time to truly educate me on a lot of things that we had spoken about before, but it maybe didn't click as much as it did in this moment. And it's empowered me to be able to have those conversations with other people and to talk about it publicly, which is something I never really did before. And I appreciate that. And I think it's, we just have so much work to do in that area. And it does break my heart because it's, he's someone that I love and adore. And it, it hurts me to see people that I love hurting. And it really made a huge, huge impact on my life this year, and honestly for the rest of my life. So regardless of where things go, I tell him all the time, we're not married yet, but I will keep everything that I learned this year and take with me into the future, because it's really been life-changing for sure.
There you go. I think that's a hell of an answer. And now, of course, the one of the fun ones. What's the last thing you purchased that's less than $100 that's made your life easier or more enjoyable?
Oh my goodness. Okay, let me see. Where is, trying to look for it. Okay, so I invested. I'm kind of a crafty girl over here on my side. So I bought a resin kit.
Oh,
and
okay.
I've been dabbling because I saw someone do it on TikTok, and it's not that I didn't think it looked hard. It looked hard. It looked very hard, but it looked fun. So I got a resin kit, and I made I actually haven't given it to them yet, but I made a a tray, almost like a cheese board, out of the engagement notice, the wedding invitation, and a thank you note that we got for my brother and my sister-in-law's wedding.
Wow.
So I put their pictures into it, and I made it into a cheese board. So I'm going to give it to them in a week or so. But I was really excited because I've been saving. I save everything from everyone's engagements and bridal showers and everything, but I've never known what to do with it. So now I'm I can make it just a little cheese tray out of this. It's so cute, but I'm still learning. I'm definitely not that great at it, but it was $40, and here I am just making coasters every day.
It's funny because, just talking about TikTok and everything else, I said to myself, let's see if she says that she bought a Cricut printer.
Honestly, I almost did.
I knew it.
I almost did, but my sister-in-law has one, and then my best friend Ashley has one. So I was like, you know what? Let's wait a while, see if I can just get them to do things for me first before I have to make an investment. But it's on my list. It's definitely on my list.
There you go. What was your favorite toy growing up?
Oh my gosh, I had my favorite toy. I had damn, is it my princess dollhouse or my little dog? I had this little dog I used to sleep with every single night, to the point where, and I'm sure you probably know this because you have kids, but I used to squeeze its neck and hold it really tight when I would sleep. So then the neck just started to go limp. So It had no structure in its body. And at one point my mom just kind of threw it out because she thought it was just useless. But I cried and cried and cried. That was my favorite toy.
Jeez. Yeah, definitely have that. Like my daughter, she's 2, so she's now into getting into the plush stuff. But yeah, she didn't care anything about that initially. My wife bought little lovey things, which is a plush thing attached to a towel, and she gave no kind of a damn about any plush stuff. She's like, why doesn't she like bears? I'm like, I don't know. And then she comes into my office and I have toys and stuff everywhere, and she's like, oh, this Voltron is really nice, and I'm like, where are you going? So now she comes into my office.
Love that.
Yep, she comes into my office every day and plays with Voltron for 10 minutes. And then I have a box of old retro toys that I'm getting rid of. So she kept going in the box, and I'm like, get out of the box. And I finally found I forgot when I was younger, I had bought Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story. And now it's her Buzz Lightyear. So now he goes with her in the car and stuff. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And when my wife and I were dating, I had gave her a lion, which she ended up giving to my daughter. And it was funny because my daughter was sleeping with him. And exactly like you said, just the squeezing of the neck until there's no stability left. That is 100% truth.
I can't even explain it. But it's funny because when I think about it, that stuffed animal looks a lot like the dog that I currently have.
That explains a lot.
I wonder if there was a connection there from me liking curly-haired tan dogs.
It is possible. So the last one, if I call you up a year from today and I go, Melissa, what are you up to? Where's the business at? What would you respond?
That's a great question. I think my goal this year is to grow. So a year from now, I will hope that I, have grown exponentially. I want to do double numbers on my social accounts. I want to be featured in some more publications. I want to be featured on additional podcasts. So it's really a priority of mine to just grow, because the more that I could grow the show, the more that the stories of the women I'm sharing are growing and being shared as well. And I feel like there's so much value in the people that I interview. And I, don't mean to digress, but sometimes it's infuriating to see, people who are just like celebrities start a podcast, and then all of a sudden they have all of this growth and all these partnerships, and it's, and the show's trash, like the show's not good. And I'm not saying my show's fantastic and incredible and made for everybody, but I do feel like the women that I interview are fantastic and are great, and their stories are unique and impressive. And I just wish that there'd be more emphasis put on a lot of those networks to showcase podcasts like mine, and not necessarily just like, the Bachelorettes starting 14 different podcasts. But no hate. I don't have any hate towards any of that, but I just wish that there'd be a little bit more focus on stories about career growth rather than like who's kissing who and who's doing what,
Well, you know what the problem is, that with regards to that, think about this. You wake up, you watch crime shows, you watch reality shows, you watch them because it forces you to think, even though, reality TV to some is, mindless, but it still forces you to think because you're piecing together these people's struggles. You're wondering what it's like for them, et cetera, just based on the depictions that you're getting on television. But the thing about it is, with those shows, once the cameras go off, it's like the window dressing comes off.
Right.
And for a lot of the reality shows, that's why it's funny you mentioned like The Bachelorette and stuff like that, because those shows, they come in, they get their 15 minutes of fame. Nobody comes 5 years later and wonders where they're at. Maybe they do, but 9 times out of 10, they don't.
Right.
So
no, it's true.
So I always look at podcasting in the same way, that people are going to dip their toes in the pool and everybody's going to jump into the space. And eventually, it's survival of the fittest. They'll just not care about it. They'll stop doing it. I've seen more abandoned shows than in the last 2 years than I've seen in quite some time. Number one, because people are home. Number two, they think, oh, I'll just turn on the mic and go. And it's like, yeah, it's great, but it's not that simple.
Right. No, that's so true. That's so true. I have conversations like that all the time because it is hard. Podcasting is not easy. And especially if you're, a one person show and you do your recordings, your scheduling, your editing, your producing, your publishing, and, you do all that on your own.
Yep.
And then you see people just like jump into a network where all they do is sit in a chair, speak, and then they get to leave and not worry about it. Yep. And it gets edited and published all for them. And, like that's the one thing that I've always tried to, or I'm trying to continue to do, is put a focus on shows where they're, you're doing everything, because I feel like that also is when networks are looking to hire, like, I've done it all. Like I do it all for myself.
Yep.
So, so you don't need to hire 5 people to manage my show. I manage my own show.
That's what I'm actually doing now while looking for a job. Because I said to my wife, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to go and sit behind a desk because I worked in corporate. So
absolutely,
almost 20 years in, and I'm like, I'm not doing this shit again. I want a podcast. I want to do content create. Like I want to do something in that wheelhouse. So I am 100% there with you.
On the same page, always.
Yep. And the last one, reach one, teach one. We always want to give our listeners something valuable to close things out. But in your case, I'm going to do something a little different. So, I'm going to give you a scenario, and that's how you're going to share your gem. So you get a call, and you're going to speak in front of a class of middle school girls. And your job is to tell them how to start their own business. What advice would you give them?
Oh, wow. Oh, I love that. I love that, mainly because I actually do want to go back to schools and maybe do some public speaking. So that's cute. But I think the first piece of advice I would give them is I would encourage them to think about things that they love. Think about something that they love, something that they keep going back to, and start there. Don't try to do something just because someone else is doing it, or, don't discourage yourself from doing something because you're afraid of what people will think. I always go back to this one story. I don't know if you're familiar, but this woman, Carly Bible, who's like a makeup YouTube personality. She's very popular on YouTube. But one of the videos I listened to about her is she said that in high school, she started her YouTube channel and that people made fun of her. She would go into school and people would be like, oh my God, that's the girl who does her makeup on YouTube. And they would say really discouraging things, but she kept forward, she kept pushing forward. And now she's worth like $7 million. So I would encourage you to not listen to the naysayers, because I did. People told me, oh, that's silly. Oh, who will care? Women aren't really that disrespected in the workplace. Like, no one will listen to that. That's stupid. So I didn't, I didn't do it. I paused, I held off, and who knows where we would be right now if I had started when I wanted to. So I would encourage them to think about things that they love and that they're passionate about, and not worry about what people want to say to them and the words of, negative thoughts. Here's my dog barking in the background.
There you go.
But not worry about what people think, not worry about the negative thoughts and the negative vibes. Don't let people portray their feelings of self-conscious thoughts on you. Don't let that happen. And that would be just my vibe there. But
nice.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I think that's a great way to close things out. Melissa, thank you for taking the opportunity to share the toys and tech of your trade.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
What an awesome conversation with Melissa. I had such a blast, and I'm really, really glad that I got to share her story and the FemmeTrepreneur brand with you folks. To find out more about FemmeTrepreneur, FemmeRadio, and everything that Melissa's working on, you can go to getfemmed.com. GETFEMMED.com. And you can find out more, like I said, about the FemmeTrepreneur brand, FemmeRadio, which you can find on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you consume podcasts. You can find her podcast there. And, of course, you can pick up some FemmeTrepreneur merch as well via her site, and we'll include links to that and the store in the show notes for this episode. Also, some of the stuff we discussed, we will link to, and whether it's books, toy recommendations, whatever it is that we discussed, will be in the show notes for this episode. Full disclosure, as always, some of those items may contain affiliate links, which if you click to purchase an item, it will not change the cost, but we'll receive a small commission, which of course goes towards improving our shows, our website, all of the stuff that we use to give you folks the content you enjoy. As always, if you want to keep up with RageWorks and all the work that we do, you can find us on the social media platform of your choice, including such gems as Pinterest. Yeah, we have a couple of Pinterest boards, which are doing quite well, I might add. So definitely look for RageWorks there. And of course, YouTube, etc. If you're consuming the podcast via YouTube and you haven't subscribed, throw us a sub. We'd really, really appreciate it. Lastly, I believe a couple of episodes back, I mentioned a studio space that we're working on, hopefully to open in the late spring, early summer of this year, for folks to come in, record podcasts, record vlogs, maybe get some streaming in, do product photography, etc. With everything going on with COVID and people wanting to pursue a lot of these passion projects, they are sometimes hindered because they don't have the space or they don't have the equipment. And my goal, and the goal of those that I'm working with to get this up and running, is to give people a place where they can come and create this content without the shackles of not having the right camera or not having the right mixer or not having the best microphone. We provide the gear, you provide the content, and most importantly, it's going to be affordable, and we hope to have it up and running late spring, early summer, putting it into the ether right now, but We are working on getting funding, finding a space, etc. But if you want to stay up to date with that project and you're in the New York City area and that's something you want to mess with, by all means, make sure to sign up for our email list, which I'll link to in the show notes for this episode. And if you want to stay up to date and don't want to rely on social, you can sign up for an email list for the RageWorks network or for the RageWorks site, where we'll share, new movie trailers, product reviews, etc. And of course, as I said, for the network, you'll get up to date with stuff regarding shows, new shows that are going to be debuting, and other network related information that I just don't want to toss on social and I think would be better suited for emails. As always, thank you folks for your continued support. I truly, truly appreciate it. And as always, if you want to stay up to date, find RageWorks on social, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Peace. Toys and Tech of the Trade is part of the RageWorks podcast network, your source for rants about gaming, entertainment, and the works. Visit us at RageWorksNetwork.com.